Greetings, gender psychologists. We're getting into chapter 9, which is about romance. As I've been sort of pre-telling all the way through the course, romance, I'm the least qualified person on earth to talk about it. That'll be pretty clear when we get to the part about love, in fact. So let's start here. Is there a sex disparity in mate preference? That is, do male humans and female humans fundamentally look for something different in potential partners? And the answer is, yeah, pretty much that's true. Status versus appearance. Female humans seem to be in search of high status mates, whereas male humans just get to enact their preferences. They're looking for an attractive mate, whatever they think that is, and there's some limitations around whatever they think that is. We'll get to in a second. All right, so basically every country in the world is basically unequal. Men have more power than women. Fewer than 1% of world leaders are female. Fewer than 1% of Fortune 500 companies are headed by women. Power accrues to maleness on this planet, always has, and I'm not willing to say always will, but there are some serious roadblocks in the way. For example, of getting a female president elected in the United States, there are some serious problems with the proposition. This is a sexist country, for better or for worse, and I grant you it's for worse. So, because men are on the upside of power, men can accrue their own status. That is, men can get high status jobs and make lots of money and participate in the economy, and women are much less likely to be able to do so. And from here on out, I'm going to say women can't, as shorthand for women are much less likely to be able to do so. Which means that when you're hitching your wagon, men get to pull the wagon, and women somewhat have to attach themselves to men in order to get the stable lifestyle, high standards of living, reproductive viability that the species wants. Okay, that's the way it is. Is that the way it should be? I leave that up to you, and I basically agree that's not the way it should be. Okay, so men get to shop their preference. So whatever you're looking for in another human being, whatever you find to be attractive, gentlemen, you get to go out and try to find and compete for. But this is not purely outside the realm of status. There is, men tend to be competing for status, the high status jobs, occupations, respect from other people, deference in public. But the more attractive your mate is, the more status is conferred to you. So it's not completely independent of those pursuits. Men are also in search of higher status and finding that higher status through a mate. But since women typically are not successful in the workforce, and it would be a demotion in status to marry up financially, that's how we're getting status out of our mates. Okay, so this stuff is based largely on self-reports, and you know the problems right now with self-report data. That is, number one, people are lying liars who lie. You know what's acceptable and unacceptable. You know what is supposed to be true, and you know what everybody else thinks, and so your answers on survey questions are polluted, especially when it's really personal stuff that you might feel squishy about admitting to. And people are not good witnesses of their own experience. In other words, people are lying liars who lie, and it's not always me that you're lying to. We go back to that issue of racism, and we ask HR departments, is anyone in your department a racist? Of course, the answer you're going to get back is no, absolutely not. But you send out those resumes, 500 say John Smith at the top, 500 say Jamal Smith at the top. They're otherwise completely 100% identical, and Jamal gets 14% fewer callbacks than John, right? You know, someone who said they weren't a racist is lying, but probably not to me, probably lying to themselves. So we need better stuff than self-report data to say that men are looking for attractive mates, physically pretty mates, and women are looking for high status mates who can support them. We need better data than that. And we have it. So our book talks about a speed dating paradigm. What happens is that women sit at the tables and men move around from woman to woman, and that introduces some biases. It means that the women are the ones who are shopping, and it makes it so that they are more likely to rate appearance over anything else because they're in the shopping mode. They're in this sort of weird upside of power. I'm coming to your house. So initially, the speed dating paradigms don't find any difference in preference for attractiveness. Okay. But when we reverse the paradigm and um, yeah, when we reverse the paradigm, I made my notes strange. Women less heavily prefer attractiveness. That is, the stereotypes start to creep in when it's the man shopping and the woman walking from person to person. The studies use college students. College students don't represent Americans. They tend to be young, relatively poor but ambitious, really shopping for they're low status, so they're even more shopping for mates with a lot of potential. So males and females would be looking for someone with earning potential that could lead to home ownership and marriage and all that stuff. The more that we use a diverse body, we recruit across the board, don't use college student samples of convenience, then those gender stereotype differences reemerge. That is, men like pretty women, women like successful men. Some of that's going to be age too, because there's culture change over time. When you only include the younger cohort, they're a much more egalitarian group of people than, say, baby boomers or greatest generation, which is what happens when a generation gets to name itself. There's lots of other data, though. There's a ton of other data on this. Women prefer men who drive nice cars. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a little photo album. It's just a 12-page photo album. It's small. I'm going to put 12 pictures of men in there and just approach women on the street and go, hey, please rate each of these people from 0 to 10 in terms of attractiveness, okay? And what you don't realize is that numbers 3 and 7 are the same man, but in one picture he's standing in front of like a 1984 Chevy Citation, and in another picture he's standing in front of like a 2020 Corvette. Um, it's the same guy. It's the same guy in the same clothes with the same facial expression, the same stance, and women prefer the man standing in front of the more expensive car. They rate him higher than they rated him in front of the cheaper car, and they don't pick up on the fact that they saw the same dude twice. So that's a little tiny corner of the evidence that women are looking for status more than the physical attractiveness of their partners. It kind of depends. It kind of depends when you ask them, though, and what tasks you give in order to get that information. A little bit. Men also are full of foibles. So if we prime men to think about marriage, long-term relationships, LTR is long-term relationships, we're priming men to think about marriage, the future, being a father, then when we show them pictures of women, they look at those women's faces. They make eye contact with the pictures. When we prime them to think of short-term relationships, overnights, hookups, as the kids would say, then they look at women's bodies. We actually have a little camera mounted in the screen up here that tracks your eye gaze, where you're looking, and so that's how we know that. So, like, ladies, your mom was right. It's not that all men are only interested in one thing, but it is when they're interested in that, you have to keep reminding them, hey, buddy, eyes are up here. Okay, there, that. More of men's foibles. Exotic dancers, strippers make more money when they are fertile. So the closer they are to fertility, the more tip money they make. Their behavior is not overtly different. They act the same from day to day, but there's a number of changes, like not overtly noticeable change in voice timbre, a slightly higher pitch on the voice, and a little increase in skin clarity. Just maybe pheromones. Pheromones are largely junk science, but women don't know when they're fertile. We've only had clinical data on this in the last 15 years. So it's not that they could be acting differently on purpose. And the men don't know that they're picking up on anything. It's just that men are more attractive to more attracted to more fertile women. So that's happening. And back to the ladies, fertile women prefer more physically attractive mates. They like that T-shaped body with the broad shoulders, narrow hips, and clear skin and symmetrical features and muscle definition and tight buttocks and all that stuff. I've made my notes wrong again. Prefer stability. There we go. So fertile women prefer the attractive male. Women between fertile periods prefer the stable male. Someone with a job and the marrying type, maybe already married, and maybe a bald spot and a little paunch on the belly, signs of additional resources. So you want to have children with the most genetically fit samples, but raise children with the guy who has the means to support children. Sometimes you get really lucky and those are the same guy. Other times, not. I'm not bagging even on humans here. Like across the mammalian species, we see these tendencies to more or less try and have babies with the most genetically fit, but find the best support for those babies, and that's not always the same partner there. Okay, I leave should up to you. That's how it is. Attractiveness. What's attractive? Well, it's partially quantifiable and partially preferential. So we know about the golden ratio, and we know about the highly symmetrical features and skin clarity and whiteness of teeth and all that stuff. But then there's cultural factors, right? Like preferences for female mustaches, they're uncommon, but they happen. And tall, slender guys who liked over here. And so what do we know about this? We know that the people are pushing types on us, right? Like Miss America, the weight of Miss America, the body mass of Miss America has been coming steadily down since the first contest in the 1950s. And her age has been also reducing year over year since the 1950s. So the contest judges, the like arbiters of fashion and style, are pushing on us the skinny, fit, young type. But that's not really what people actually want. It's what we know we're supposed to want, all right? And that has an impact on what we do want, but it's not really completely what we want. So I know it's distasteful, but here it is. Pornhub is a massive clearinghouse for data. They keep the metadata on their members, which means that it's stripped of all the identifying characteristics, and they release that data once a year to social scientists so we can see what people are searching for. And what people are searching for is not the Miss America type. People are looking for age appropriate. All right, so older guys seem to be looking for older ladies, and younger guys maybe for younger ladies. And it just doesn't match up with this idea that we worship youth and necessarily beauty. When it comes to body types, people aren't necessarily searching for thin or slim or skinny. They're either not specifying, or they're specifying other things like average or heavy or something like that. So what we're expected to want, what's popular on magazine covers and so on, is not necessarily what we really want. And the same is, I mean, women don't look at those sorts of resources enough to have solid data, but we're so similar in all other respects. I'd expect that what's being pushed as a standard for male beauty is also not really what women are into. Dating. When it comes to dating sites, the experimental evidence really suggests that we're interested in similarity. So if you wear glasses, you're most interested in a partner with glasses. And if you're blonde, you look at blondes more than brunettes. And if you're white, you look at white people. And if you're black, you look at black people. And if you're religious, you look at religious people, outward similarity trumps, but inward similarity, if you can detect it, uh, it also pulls people together. Um, so OkCupid, back when that was actually still a dating site, did the same as Pornhub. Once a year, they'd release all their metadata, and they do personality. They did anyway. They did a ton of personality testing. People would submit personality tests. That was the fun of being OkCupid. Even if you weren't looking, I was on there building tests like what kind of Jedi would you be and stuff like that. You can go in there, and they release all that data, and it's just and search data, finding data, who gets together, who exchanges messages, stripped of identifying characteristics. What we find out is that in practice, people behave similarly to in the experiments, which is we're really interested in similarities across lots of domains, especially when we're looking at long-term relationships. All right. If we prime people to think about hookups, short terms, one night stands, that kind of stuff, then people are willing to step out of their proverbial comfort zone, but only on one dimension at a time. So we're talking cross religion dating, cross race dating, cross national lines dating, stuff like that, but only one. So the person would have to be similar to you in like all other respects for that to be really super attractive. Okay. When we're dealing with heterosexual, cis men and women, big dating pool. I mean, that's the vast majority of people everywhere on Earth and in America. So GLBTQIA plus dating, that's going to be more difficult. There's a smaller dating pool. There are fewer people in the dating pool. Those people aren't always readily identifiable. If we're eating at the company lunchroom, as it were, then in some kinds of setting at work, in church, then GLBTQIA is probably going to be covert rather than overt, and figuring out who even it's acceptable to ask is going to be a challenge, which means what? It means more compromises. So you can't always get someone very similar to you or very stereotypically attractive, and so you do the best that you can. Good. So there's that. Why? Why this preference for attractiveness, males looking at females, and status, females looking at males? Evolutionary psychology. The Evo model is going to say that we're the tournament culture. Go back to the Bob Sapolsky lectures, and you have your choice in mammals and especially in primates. Some of us are tournament societies, and some of us are pair bonding societies, and we really empirically fall kind of right between those two things. But in a society where males have to compete for females, we see a lot of the traits that human males have. We're not as sexually dimorphic as other kinds of primate, never mind other kinds of mammals. There's only, for example, like a 10% size difference between us. But usually it's pretty clear whether you're looking at a male or female. We're fairly readily identifiable, especially with our clothes off, right? It takes some effort to disguise male or femaleness for the majority of the human species. The size of male genitalia and the amount of sperm production and male-female violence, male-male violence, just 1,000 factors point us towards we are at least 50% a tournament species. And in a tournament species, status matters. Status is how you get mates. Females don't get social status. Females don't lead the group, protect the group. Females have the more passive role. So it sort of makes sense for the species from that Evo perspective. Just always take Evo psychology like you take your margarita, heavily salted. It's not a perfect model because we're also at least 50% the pair bonding species, where we can certainly be cooperative, and we have lots of cooperative societies. We can get married and stay that way for life. The majority of marriages are don't have any cheating in them. There, like that. So just take your Evo Psych with salt. And just because a thing is natural also doesn't mean that it's right. Okay, so just always have that also in the back of your mind. Morality, you have to decide about that. The social role theory. Social roles change over time and across cultures. What do we expect of men? What do we expect of women? And so what's masculine? What's feminine? Masculine is asking a girl out, and if you want to marry a girl, you ask her father. Yeah, okay, fine. But if you want to marry a woman, then you ask her. What are the social expectations, etiquette and protocol and chivalry, and men go to work and women stay home and sew dresses? What are the social expectations? Those change across time and across cultures. Some evidence for this is that the more egalitarian is a society, the less that we see these differences that we're looking at. Rich middle-aged women can absolutely afford for 18, 19-year-old dudes with abs all day long, you know what I mean? With lots of stamina and prowess and stuff like that. And young men trying to pay their way through college are often perfectly happy to go out at night with 50-year-old women and help them have a good time and have a good time later, because they need the status that they don't yet have, right? The status that leads to money and the ability to get your needs met and pay your college tuition. So there's all that. The social construction theory, which is telling us that society not only tells us who we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to be doing based on our body shape and genitalia, but also who we're supposed to love and how. Like, how is love enacted? We'll get a little deeper into some of this as we go ahead, but like, if you are on a Chinese dating site, Chinese women looking for American men, they absolutely know how to use the language of love, but they will say, I love you almost the first time that you interact with them. Because for them, the idea of romantic love, well, that's rooted in 19th and 20th century American poetry, romantic poetry, Wadsworth and Yeats and all that crap, you know, Ode to a Grecian Urn and Truth is Beauty and Beauty Truth. And that culture of romantic love just doesn't exist. Love it's not, is there even such a thing? There isn't romance. Connections are pragmatic ones. Historically, at least, have been very pragmatic ones, right? So the way that we're told to do love, to marry for love and to date and romance and take her out for dinner and propose on one knee, all that scripted stuff, that's socially constructed. Certainly some evidence for that, and not that much evidence against it. That we're kind of sheepy and we do what other people do, we see what other people do, and we just do that. Okay. So scripts, yeah, scripts are down here. Initiating, who asks, yeah, like that. Who's in charge of making that first move and getting the proverbial ball rolling? Well, basically everywhere on earth it's men. America, we can talk about for sure. Men are supposed to initiate. That can be really problematic because men aren't really great at initiating, and women don't always want men to initiate. So maybe you're at the gym and you're just trying to get fit and stuff and walk on the treadmill and lift the weights. Then if you're a female human, just expect a parade of men to walk by and hit on you, doing that initiating thing that we're supposed to do that it's socially constructed that we do it and we have the right to do it. And it's just not welcome. It's particularly not welcome in this setting. You don't go to the gym to find love, probably. I'm sure some people do, but on average, that's not what the gym is for. The gym is for picking up heavy shit and putting it down again. Okay, so there's that. So it certainly can be very problematic. Dating sites, we go back to the internet, and dating sites where men are largely in charge of initiation. There's a ton of harassment and scurrilous, dirty kind of comments coming in those inboxes, and women have thousands sometimes of things to respond to, and they only respond to the one or two that that seems best, which makes frustration, which makes worse behavior. It can be a really nasty cycle. But what if we change it up? What if we make it so that men are unable to initiate contact on those dating sites, and only women can send out invitations for online dialogue? Well, those are really unpopular, though. They're unpopular with men, and they're unpopular with women. A few schools, the classic prom is that the boy asks the girl to the prom. I've read about it. I wasn't in America for those years of my life, but the boy asks the girl, and the girl says yes, and they go to the prom, and there's this whole script that goes with it, and the limousines you can't afford and all that crap. A few schools were like, yeah, this is sexist. Let's change it up. Let's have no, we're still going to do prom. It's going to be traditional. We're going to have another dance, and that dance is going to be, but girls ask, right? You go to the dance if a girl asks you to go to the dance. And girls just didn't ask boys to go to the dance. The dances were really poorly attended. Stop doing them. What is that? Well, maybe it's boys are more sexually minded, and that occupies more of their attention. And so when you leave it to girls are more interested in their academic pursuits. That could be, sure. And it could also be that it contradicts the scripts and it flips type, and we don't like people who behave out of type for their gender. For whatever reason, we can do it that way, but it tends to be really unpopular. You need more social change for it to be effective, but paradoxically, to get more social change, you need to keep pushing on it, and show people that it can be done that way. In subgroups, so we're talking about general purpose dating sites, inclusive dating sites. So your eHarmony and your OkCupid when that was around, and what's the other big one? I forget. I don't know them all. Maybe Tinder. I don't know much about Tinder, but it seems like it's probably inclusive, which means everyone is on there. Well, those kinds of sites tend to exclude these three populations, right? There's no excuse for farmers only. There's no excuse for J-date or Christian dating, because people who are Christians or Jewish or farmers actually get plenty of attention on the sort of all-purpose, all-group dating sites. But elders, people over 50, the grayer your hair, the less likely you are to be contacted by anyone on the dating sites. So like an over 55 dating site, mature people looking for other mature people, that actually does make a certain amount of sense. GLBTQIA plus, the dating pool is pretty small, and concentrating that all in one site again would make a certain amount of one site like for each group would make a certain amount of sense, because gay people don't get that much love on Tinder or eHarmony, don't get that many responses back. It seems to take specialized grouping to do that. Black women. Hispanic women do fine, Hispanic men, Black men do fine. Black women in particular just don't get contacts. maybe you're a Black woman and you individually do, but as an average, they're the most neglected group of people on the dating sites. So it does make a certain amount of sense to have like a Black dating site. Um, so there's that. Other minority groups actually do reasonably well. Uh, oh goodness, there's a site for only professional people. So it's like elite dating or something like that, and it's people who make more than $200,000 a year or something. And again, there's no excuse for that. That's basically that's on the edge of like the sugar daddy site right there. Um, if you make money, you'll be fine on any of the other dating sites. No reason for it. So scripts, how do we ask each other out? Society really tells us very much how to initiate romantic relationships. And that can be more or less dysfunctional, right? So you get a lot of modeling. Maybe you watch TV, maybe you watch movies. I don't know where the YouTube generation is going to get their scripting. They're largely not watching television the way that Gen X or even millennials watch television. So where are those scripts going to come from? But movies, De Beers Diamond Company, they sort of monopolized diamonds from South Africa by 1940, give or take. Bought up all the small diamond mining operations and intimidated small miners out and claim jumped, and there's even some allegations of murder involved. And so they really got a huge monopoly on the diamond trade. But then they have this rock, and it really is just a rock. It has no intrinsic inherent value. They're like, well, how can we sell these things? You might think that the idea of the diamond engagement ring goes back for generations. Well, yeah, but not many generations. Not many generations. They started doing product placement with diamonds in movies. So Clark Gable and Betty Davis, or whoever's in the movie, and the man is proposing to the woman, and he pulls out a diamond engagement ring. And this gives us our script for how marriage proposals are done. We see actors doing it, and it looks romantic, and everyone in the theater goes giddy over it. And then men start proposing to women with diamonds. Diamond sales absolutely surge. Uh, right. So that's the power of modeling, and that's the power of social construction. Prior to that, rings weren't really necessarily much of a thing at all, let alone diamond rings. Like anything, if you were doing a ring, anything would do. But now it's all about rings and it's all about diamonds, and the rocks remain more or less worthless. They have value because we confer value upon them. They don't really have, outside of science and industry, really any value at all. Okay. Prom invitations kind of work the same. So the YouTube generation will know about this one, man. YouTube lights up around prom season. When even is that? Is it soon? I don't even know. Lights up with will you be my prom date stuff. Boys inviting girls, sometimes girls inviting boys, or boys inviting boys or girls, or whatever thing is happening. But mostly boys inviting girls, and in the most like outrageous, over the top, flashy, and therefore romantic fashion that they can come up with. Um, so, do you need to know how to invite someone to prom? If you're living on YouTube, then you'll get the idea. That's how you invite people to prom. I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan, but I do like the part of one of the later movies where Harry and uh, his I just can't remember Weasley. Uh, uh, Ron Weasley. Harry and Ron Weasley have to get effectively prom dates, and they don't do some big flashy fire in the sky, exploding flowers. Will you go to prom with me trick? They sort of schlub around, wait so long that their preferences are already taken, and then like really super nervously stutter it out while not making eye contact and ready to run away. That's a great script because we can all manage that, right? Doesn't cost anything and we can all manage it. So the scripts that we're handed might be more or less empowering, more or less dysfunctional. And like the more times you see on YouTube, it's a female human asking someone else, asking a male and upsetting the power dynamics, asking another female, and just really keeping that message out there that gay is okay, gay is totally normal, and uh, there might empower somebody to actually take the reins and push back on that power dynamic because they'll have a script for it. They'll have a script for it. Okay. Intimacy. Intimacy here really is, as we talked about in friendships, it's like how much are we self-disclosing, emotionally disclosing, that kind of thing. And everybody wants intimacy and everybody thinks of it more or less in the same kinds of terms, you know, mostly to an extent. When it gets to partner intimacy, then we see a little bit of divergence in satisfaction in particular. Um, I had some trouble with this section because our author keeps using words like but and however, but the point she's making, the next line of text does not seem to contradict the previous line of text. So I'm not entirely clear 100% what she's trying to say in here. Maybe you'll have better luck than I did. So, but here, everyone, you know, if we think about intimacy in scientific terms, then there's a lot of divergence between men's and women's views of intimacy. But if you just ask people and get the lay definition, then men and women basically agree what is intimacy. But it's still true that men are less comfortable talking about their feelings, being vulnerable. Women are more comfortable doing that. Men want more boundaries. Women want fewer boundaries. Okay. So men and women definitely have different priorities and different comfort levels with intimacy. Everybody wants it, but not always to 100% the same degree. So we might have differences in partner satisfaction because in a hetero couple, you might have a man and a woman sitting on the couch watching television and they're holding hands. And the male human feels like that is really intimate. There's physical contact and we're close together and we're being quiet and sharing space and doing something we both enjoy. What could be more intimate than that? But the female human is really dissatisfied because she would rather be having a conversation about the future or what it's like to be together in this space right now. So everybody wants the intimacy and we all agree what it means, but women might be better at it than men and men might frustrate women as an average. Now, the older the man and the woman are, like the more likely that is to be true because our masculine and feminine stereotypes, demand characteristics, and so on have changed over time. So younger people, younger males might be a lot more comfortable being in their feelings, sharing those feelings, and being vulnerable than older American males. I don't have a ton of really great data for that at the moment. This is where things got really weird with the contradictions that aren't contradictions. So it's a little, I'm a little hazy here. But it seems that same-sex female relationships are more satisfying than hetero female-male relationships because of this, that women seem to want more intimacy and be good at more intimacy and want fewer boundaries. Men want space and they want to be left alone with their problems, at least outwardly. Women, though, want to be together and on average, share those more feeling oriented things and talk about the future and the present, really be together. So holding hands, sitting on the couch, watching the same TV show, yeah, sometimes, but also that eye contact, closeness, togetherness, teamwork stuff. So same-sex female relationships. Lesbian women seem to be more satisfied with the intimacy of their relationships than hetero women with their cross-sex intimate relationships. And when it comes to gay men, same-sex male relationships, in some ways also might be more satisfying, but in some ways might be a little, I want to say a little less satisfying, but also the reason for that would be that when a man's with a woman, when a hetero man is in a relationship with a hetero woman, that intimacy, even if he resists it a little bit, is probably the only intimacy that he has in his life. Men tend to be competitive, and so we compete even with our friends and keep them at a distance and compliment them with insults and never, revealing our personal selves is pretty difficult. So for the male in the long-term relationship with a female, that's his only confidant and his best friend, and so that would be very satisfying. And same-sex male relationships, they prioritize space and boundaries, so there isn't that female type human pushing more and greater and deeper intimacy than you might necessarily be comfortable with. So that pressure is off, and you're getting what you want, and we're happy, and we kind of think the same, and we have the same sorts of priorities. At the same time, you don't have that solitary, intimate confidant. But that might not be less satisfying because you also don't need them. Because gay men also have lots of friends, real friends compared to straight men, are less about the competitive aspects of the relationship and more about the intimacy to begin with in other relationships. So they don't need that confidant. They're not looking for that, and so might not be dissatisfied by it not being as much in those kinds of relationships compared to other kinds of relationships. So that's complicated, right? Yeah, good. What I want to do is push away certainty, never be too sure about anything. Next topic is love, and love's hard to talk about. Like, what are we talking about even? What do you mean love? In scientific terms, there's no such thing as love. I can't study it because I can't operationalize it. I can't tell if it's present or not. I can't observe it or measure it. And so as a scientific topic, it's like talking about God. I mean, I acknowledge that it's possible that there's such a thing, but where do I start? What experiment can I conduct to prove that it's not a thing? I can tell you love is not an emotion. So Eckhart's faces. Eckhart sort of traveled the world and got photographs of people, old, young, and in between, doing all kinds of things. And he looked at their faces and he discovered 8 basic emotions in their faces. So finding one is that everyone expresses emotions in the same way, maybe not to the same degree, but a smile means the same thing all the world over. You see someone who's smiling and you know what it means that they're smiling. And frowns mean the same thing. And you can put that together and you look at babies' faces in particular, and you can get the sort of emotional states, affective states that we're born with that are more or less universal and basic. And love is not one of them. I don't even remember all 8, but it's like happiness, sadness, anger, interest, disgust. Is disgust an emotion? Turns out it mostly is, and a couple more: fear. And so there's that. Love's not an emotion. Love's not an emotion. I mean, at best, love could be 8 emotions, I guess. So the way that the Greeks talked about love is kind of this list that I stole from the internet. And so eros, the erotic love, that would be the lusty sorts of feelings that happen in your groin area, or the butterflies in your stomach when you think about that potential partner or that partner, right? The sexy time feelings, eros erotica. Philia, affectionate love, your need to just want to be close to someone and hug them, and like when you look at a cute cat or a baby, that's what you feel. Philia, the affectionate side. Storge, or love within a family. So filial piety, filial with an F, nothing to do with philia. Filial piety, the need to love your brothers and your sisters, fraternity, and obey your parents. So that's also basic to humans. Playful love and obsessive and enduring. Pragma, interesting. Pragmatism, love that makes sense, that happens for reasons, like to unite households and unify economic resources and stuff like that. Pragma, the enduring long term. Is that love? Well, the Greeks thought so. Uh, uh, Philautia, or the self-love, and agape, the love of people in the abstract. So a religious figure like the Buddha, who the saint in Buddhism is the person who is, so you're supposed to like ascend through forms, and if you live a good life as a human, if you live enough good lives as a human, eventually you get off the wheel of time, and you get to join Vedna in the mountain or whatever, fade into the cosmic background radiation, live in the global universal consciousness, whatever it is. But if you fail, you kind of get knocked down to like apes, and then dogs, and cockroaches, and plants, and amoebas, and like that. You're supposed to work your way up and learn the lessons, and karmically disengage from that wheel of time. And then the bodhisattva, the Buddhist saint, would be that person with the agape, who's learned not to suffer by detachment through life, and therefore learned the highest of lessons, been freed from the wheel of time, and chooses to be reincarnated again one more time as a human, so that they can teach other humans how to do this work of ascending the sort of cosmic food chain. So they've chosen to come back into a world of suffering to help other people free themselves from suffering. And that would take a certain amount of agape, right? Choosing to suffer for other people. So your religious stories are full of people demonstrating agape, love of other humans in the abstract. Okay, so there's that. Which of these things is love? Which of these things is love? Which of them even is romantic love? Is erotica romantic? Not necessarily. Is affection romantic? Not necessarily. Which is it? Is mania romantic? I mean, there are certainly some American stories that seem to suggest we should be manics for each other, be obsessed, but in practice, that turns out to be more scary than anything else, Good. So I think we need to put love away. Love's not an emotion. At best, it's 8 emotions, none of which have anything to do really with or much to do with the topic at hand. So love might be more of a mood, or in other words, a context for other emotions, maybe a long-lasting mood, maybe not. But are you ever angry with your parents? Yeah, that's what I thought. Do you love your parents? In fact, are you angry with your parents because you love them? Yeah. So maybe you're at Thanksgiving dinner and your grandma's over there spewing racist, noxious nonsense from Fox News. But if some old lady on a train was spewing racist nonsense, she might irritate you, but you wouldn't be angry with her, and you'd forget about her the second you got off the train and you go do something else. But because it's your grandmother, because it's grandma, you are really mad at her. A few years ago, my son cheated on something at school. Like, he turned in a thing late, and he forged my signature on it, saying that he had my permission to turn in a thing late at school, whatever. And I was mad as hell. I was mad as hell about that. And I know that hundreds of thousands of children cheat at school every day, and I could give a crap about them because they're not my son. I don't love them. It's because I love him that I was so mad about that behavior, right? If you're ever disappointed or sad or happy, you see strangers getting married, and maybe you have a little tickle of nostalgia, but your friends are getting married, and so you feel intense, overwhelming dread. I mean happiness that they're getting married. So it's probably more like a context in which other emotions happen, and not in itself an emotion, and not in itself even one of 8 emotions, but this other thing, this context of relationship in which other emotions are more likely to happen. But for me, I wouldn't be the first person to say, certainly, but for me, love is best understood as a verb. And just let me give you that whole thing. Love is the action of putting the needs of the other ahead of the needs of the self. Okay? So maybe you're a day laborer. You sit outside the Home Depot, hope to get picked up in a truck and given some manual labor to do for the day. And then you get dropped off at the Home Depot at the end of the day. You're walking home. You have enough money to keep the phone service running and buy one pizza at the 7-Eleven on the way to your house. So you pick up one pizza on the way home, and there's a spouse and 2 children, and there's enough pizza to go around a spouse and 2 children. And you love them, but you eat the pizza. So maybe you're right, and love's an emotion, and it's something that you feel, and it's right there. And I'm autistic. I have no particular experience of the emotion of love, and so maybe I'm overreacting because I don't have the experience that you have. I'm saying nobody has the experience. That would be a mistake. But even if you are right, what good is it? What good is it? If you eat the food instead of putting the other people's needs first, what good is that feeling of love? And I know that you've been in relationships with people who say that they love you, but put their needs ahead of your needs. What good is it? Tina Turner, what's love got to do with it? What's love but a secondhand emotion? And is it Shaka Khan? Is it Shaka Khan? Uh, uh, but what have you done for me lately? So, romance, love and romance. Who's good at romance? Who's bad at romance? Who's more romantic? Well, men are supposed to be the initiators, and so if you valued romance, you'd want that. Just bear in mind that romance itself refers to a time and place. It centers around the sort of courtly lifestyle of 17th century Italians and French people or something. But romance, the way you're thinking about it, the poetry of Wordsworth and Yeats and so on, all this has its origins in chivalry. The man proposing and kneeling before the woman. Why would I need to kneel before somebody? To show fealty, yes, but also to minimize the power dynamics, like I'm offering up my power to you. Why is that possible? Because I have all the power and you don't have any of the power. These are power dynamics. Chivalry is, if chivalry is not dead, then we need to drown it in the bathtub, as Reagan wanted to do with the government. For reasons, for good reasons, chiefest of which is that chivalry means knightly manners towards other knights on the battlefield. It's not what you think it is. Chivalry isn't throwing your cloak in the mud so that the queen can walk over it without getting her boots dirty. That's etiquette and protocol. Okay? Chivalry is you knock a knight down and you wait for him to stand up before you start swinging at him again. You don't strike at someone who's unarmed, all that stuff. The strong protect the weak. The strong protect the weak. So we're walking along the roadside and the man has to be on the outside and the woman on the inside in case of, in the modern world, traffic. Like a man's body can withstand a motor vehicle impact more than a woman's, and a woman's not permitted to sacrifice herself for a man. Gentlemen get out and open the car doors. Gentlemen hold the doors open. All this stuff is about power and who has it and who doesn't have it, who gets to demonstrate it and who doesn't get to demonstrate their possession of power. So manners is a different subject. Etiquette derives from chivalry, and that's the courtly presentation of knightly manners, lordly manners in this case. But this is all about exploiting and maintaining power imbalances. So just let chivalry die. Again, if a man wants to marry a girl, he asks her father. But let's stop marrying girls. Okay. Let's talk about sex. I'm no more enthusiastic about this than you are, honestly. But let's go. Men are more satisfied with their sex lives than women are. Well, why would that be? Number one, power imbalances. Because we live in an unequal society, women have to please men to keep them around. Men don't really have to please women to keep them around. There's a higher cost to exit relationships for women than there is for men, financially speaking. Now, the more society advances and the more egalitarian society is, the less that's true. But there's another thing happening here, which is that male sexuality is really overt and female sexuality is much more covert. Like, if a man is aroused, he cannot conceal it. It's obvious, it's physiological. Just look at the groinic region, and if that's happening, it's happening. And when a man orgasms, again, it's really, really obvious. There's no concealing it. It's not impossible, but it's difficult for a man to fake arousal and orgasm. Women can do those things. Women can keep their attraction secret. Women physiologically can choose not to give off the signs of attraction or arousal, even if it's present, and pretend that it's present, even when it's not. So it's not always obvious to men that women aren't having as much fun as they are. So men get to ask for what they want a little bit more. Okay, sure. Men in this case, our book again suggests men might be better communicators than women in this one particular dimension of existence. And I would dispute that. I'd say, if you're writing test questions about it, that's the line in the book, I guess. But it's more to do with this thing. It's the power dynamic, that men are more allowed to ask for what they want than women are in a sexist society, in a fundamentally sexist society. So there's that. Attitudes towards sex. Over time, we've gotten more and more permissive in our attitudes about sex. Again, the low point of sexual attitudes was Victorian America. Americans got way more Victorian than the Victorians did. But since then, the thing with table skirts, American artisanship, making wonderful hand-carved table legs that have this wonderful shape of leg. But if you were a lady and you saw that table leg, you'd be forced to fake a faint and fall on the fainting couch and stuff. So we make these beautiful pieces of furniture and then cover them up with fabric so that we don't hit the fainting couch so many times. Breasts and thighs. America's the only country where we talk about dark and light meat on a bird instead of breast and thigh meat. because Americans just in the Victorian period took it way over the top. And if you mentioned breasts or thighs at the dinner table, then oh my God, all the ladies would have to have a fainting fit. It's ridiculous. But over time, we've gotten more and more. I mean, we couldn't have gotten less permissive. We got more and more permissive. We had the 60s, and still not completely permissive. Still some sexual mores, and that's up to you. Like, is that good or bad? I mean, that's up to you. So 30% of men and 34% of women disapprove of having sex outside of marriage, having sex before marriage, having sexual partners other than your married partner before marrying your married partner. So 70% of men approve of sex before marriage. 91% of men say they have sex before marriage. And that, for the mathematicians among you, is a much higher number. 87% of women say they have sex before marriage. Only 66% approve of that. And this right here is some hypocrisy. So we're back to this thing way up here. How far up here? How far up here? Social construction, right? We know what we're supposed to say and what we're supposed to think and what we're supposed to feel. So your superego, or the front third of your brain, the frontal lobes, goes, oh, sex before marriage is totally wrong. But the rest of your brain knows that we're sexual beings who are supposed to engage in sexual enterprises, and marriage is completely a social construct with really very little to do with our sex lives. And so we did it. Whether people approve or disapprove of it doesn't have terribly very much to do with whether or not they do it, right? So your stated values just do not accord with enacted values. As I'll tell you over and over again in every class that you'd sit through with me, people have these wonderful, magnificent frontal lobes capable of abstract reasoning and objectifying truth, but we don't use them for that. We use our frontal lobes to back rationalize the decisions we've already made, and instead of finding truth, try to prove that what we already believe is true. Okay? So people are massive hypocrites. Good. All right. The sexual double standard, it is loosening, but still present. So we've gotten less frowny faced about women who have more than one sexual partner or date outside of marriage and stuff like that. We haven't completely gotten rid of the sort of slut-stud dichotomy. Promiscuous men are called studs, or studly and promiscuous women we call sluts, and they're doing the same behavior. It's just that they have different status in society. We can frown upon one group but not the other group. There we go. So because of the loosening up, that dichotomy is more situational than it might have been in the past. So we like women who like sex but they're married. Okay, fine. Women who have a number of sexual partners and it's obvious and they're not quiet about it, that's going to cause some worry, probably some disapproval from her contemporaries. And the casualness of those encounters, being cavalier about it in a one-night stand and not calling back, that'd be out of type and would also get some negative kind of attention. More for women than men, dichotomy still present. It's a little thing on abstinence-only sex ed in here, and I don't really want to spend a ton of time on it because I'll start shouting and nobody likes that. And also, we just don't have time for it. So sort of the spoiler alert is that abstinence-only education doesn't get you what you want, or at least what you say that you want. The people promoting abstinence-only sex ed, they say they want fewer abortions, lower STI rates, less teen pregnancy, and people to wait to have sex until they're married. That's the stated values. Now, I can only surmise that there are some other values present, because that's not what you get from doing abstinence-only sex education. You get quite the opposite, in fact. And you keep doing it. And then rationalize continuing to do it by disputing the evidence. But the evidence is clear at this point. Abstinence education just doesn't work. So it does not reduce abortion rates. It does not reduce teen pregnancy rates. Does not reduce STIs, and it does not reduce rates of girls who have sex before they're married to somebody. In some studies, in a handful of studies, it's worse than that all of this stuff actually increases, because you've not only done nothing to dissuade people from engaging in sex, you've made it worse by taking away all of the resources that they could have had to protect themselves from all this stuff. So it does slightly delay first sexual activity for girls, like abstinence pledges, virginity pledges, giving your virginity ring to your daddy to hold until you're married, that stuff. It does slightly increase the age of first sexual activity, but it does not prevent premarital sex. And it doesn't even reduce the number of sexual partners a girl has before she's married. That is, that she catches up. Everyone's doing it. It's fun. Once you kind of break the seal is broken. And so that's it. What does work? Broad content sex education. The more educated someone is, the less likely they are to engage in sexual activity. That's kind of true across ages, actually. The smarter and more educated someone is, the less they're spending their recreational time having sex. There's other pursuits that are as rewarding or more rewarding. So that's a thing also. Like a key predictor in falling birth rates is higher education rates. Education specifically about sex helps people make good decisions about what kind of sex to engage in. This first sexual activity thing. Another problem here is that it reduces first penile vaginal sexual intercourse. But there's also some evidence that girls who are delaying that intercourse, vaginal intercourse, until marriage, but not quite making it. Even though they're not having full-on vaginal sex at the same age as their peers, a little later, they're having oral sex at the same time. So it's that thing about, do young people think oral sex is sex? So that's in there too. So the author uses this startling language, actually, that abstinence-only trainings are immoral. And for her, they're immoral because they seem to cause harm. They cause shame is what they do. They don't really modify behavior, but they make girls in particular feel bad about themselves. And they're going to have sex anyway, but then they, instead of having sex and maybe possibly feeling good about it, they have sex and then feel bad about it. Okay? So a life course variable is that the younger someone is when they have their first intercourse, the more likely they are to be depressed. But if we sort of stripped that particular social value away, just taught people that sex is normal and natural, here's how you be safe. I hope you wait until you're old enough and mature. If we just did that, then we decrease the rates at which people are depressed because they feel like they can't live up to some really mostly unattainable moral social standard. As a scientist, good and bad, those aren't objectively verifiable terms. There's no objective standard for morality. I can't get God on the carpet and ask what God meant by the various commandments. There's no experiment I can run to prove something's good or bad in that authoritarian sense. But it is worse than ineffective. Okay, so that's always my starting point. What do you want? What do you want? Because this isn't getting you what you say that you want. And then if in the face of all the evidence you just keep doing it, I must assume that you want something else. I have to assume that. And what's the other thing that you want? Is it power? Do you want girls to feel ashamed of themselves? Is it some moral authority? Is it hegemony? What is the thing that you're after? And I could ask you to just be honest about that, but it's unlikely that the people pushing these practices are capable of that kind of self-honesty. And look, the leading cause of abortions is authoritarian practices. Like, the more we get authoritarian about abortions, the more abortions happen. It's not even the access to the prophylaxis. It seems to be the way that we're telling people what to do and what not to do and how that leads to them having abortions. So, right or wrong, like, I agree with people's motivations. A society that doesn't take care of the most defenseless of its members is not a good society, not a good society. But whether you're right or wrong is beside the point. The more you crusade against abortions and the more you push anti-abortion legislation, the more you make abortions happen. You just have to acknowledge, make eye contact and acknowledge that the way that you solve the problem of lots of abortions is broad content sex education and help girls feel good about themselves, civic engagement, so that they're giving to their community and feel like they have something of value to offer beyond their virginity and beyond their attractiveness. That's really effective. What predicts early intercourse? In boys and girls, alcohol and delinquency, which are not unrelated, right? And specifically in girls, depression. The more depressed a girl, the more she thinks that having sex might lift her spirits, and also the worse she feels about herself, the worse she feels like she has the ability to say no. All right. So self-esteem absolutely matters. The higher a girl's self-esteem, the less likely she is to cave to influence. So both things are true. And also not an unrelated factor with delinquency and alcohol, right? What pushes back that age of first intercourse? In male humans, the more anxious they are about sex, the less likely they are to engage in it. So civic engagement, we talked about that. You're raising that self-esteem, not artificially, not coming in with that list of self-affirmation statements to read in front of the mirror, right? I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. Stuart Smalley, Saturday Night Live, like that. We are finding other means to not only increase a girl's self-esteem, but increase her deservingness of self-esteem. She doesn't think she's good. She knows she's good because she is good. Okay? And education, especially for females, will raise that age of first intercourse. When it comes to having sex for the first time, who's having a good time? Well, across the board, males seem to enjoy sex more than females do. Report more satisfying experiences of sex, and on the first try. Yeah. Males are much more likely than females to complete the act, to reach orgasm in their first sexual experience. Females are somewhat unlikely to have that final pleasurable experience to complete the act. But everyone's satisfaction, males and females' satisfaction with their first try at sex, has been improving over time. Why sex education? We have more sex education and a little bit less shame around the act. But following the first sexual encounter, girls are still substantially more likely than boys to feel shame and guilt about it. So there is that. When it comes to promiscuity, is there a difference? I've been saying for years and years and years that men are not more promiscuous than women. But here's sort of a modifier here. Depending how you ask the question, sometimes men appear a little bit more promiscuous than women. Remember, there's a lot of socially mitigating factors, though, that in a non-rapey, non-murdery society, women are about as much into no strings attached, casual mutual gratification as men are. So our data on these tend to be self-report, okay? And what do we know about self-report? That's right. People are lying liars who lie. And it's not always me that they're lying to. It's also true that men estimate and women count. Women seem to know exactly how many men they've had sex with, and men know kind of vaguely how many women they've had sex with. So when you ask the question, you're going to get a lot more error on this side than this side. Also, though, women tend to underreport. Why? That social construction stuff earlier. It's like if I ask if people are racist, they know it's immoral to be racist, and they know that they're not immoral. So of course they say no, even though in fact their behavior contradicts them. If I go around asking people how many sexual partners they've had, men might tend to overreport because it's a sign of status. Women might tend to underreport because there are consequences in society for being a promiscuous woman that there are not for being a promiscuous man. So again, women might lie. They might intentionally underreport, or they might just like forget or not count some kinds of encounter. Or men seem to think that oral sex is sex, and women seem to think that oral sex is not sex. And you get all kinds of reasons to discount this statement that men are more promiscuous than women. The data, when you fully analyze them and look at all the error ratios and so on, it doesn't seem to be true. Men and women, non-rapey, non-murdery context, given opportunity, everyone likes it just as much as everyone else. Everyone seems to prefer a relationship. Women prefer a relationship more than men as a context for their sexual activity, but men definitely also prefer, on average, to have their sex in the context of a committed relationship. The idea that women only want sex in a committed relationship and men only want sex that's anonymous and no strings attached, it's rubbish. There is more of a tendency this way for men, more of a tendency this way for women, but we've been growing together over time as our social standards change, as the hegemonic masculinity of the 50s kind of crumbles and erodes and doesn't make much sense anymore. We're growing together, and I don't know, maybe we'll meet in the middle, but it's a disservice to say that men don't want relationships, and it's a disservice to say that women only want relationships, right? We're much closer together than farther apart at this point in human history. It's also true that about 21% of men in a recent survey admitted to cheating on their spouse, and 13% of women admitted to cheating on their spouse, okay? Everyone, men believe it's wrong, women believe it's wrong. Everyone you survey will say it's wrong to have sex out of marriage, but a fairly sizable minority of people are cheating on their partners. This is totally predictive of marital dissolution, divorce, and separation. And it doesn't matter if there are kids involved, if you're otherwise perfectly happy, you're meeting your financial goals, you spend loving time on the couch, you're also having plenty of sex. Women sometimes think a warning sign that their husband's cheating on them is that they stop having sex in the relationship, but actually getting that stimulus on the outside. First, the man feels guilty and thinks that if he isn't having sex with his wife, she'll suspect him, but also it raises his levels of testosterone and passion and all that stuff. And so you actually having more sex in the marriage might predict that the guy is cheating outside. But whatever's happening, cheating, when cheating's discovered, really predictive of dissolving that marital union. Good. Why would it be that 21% of men cheat, 13%? We're kind of getting back up into the thing that men are more promiscuous. Like, you count how many partners men report and how many partners women report, it seems like it must be true that a few women are having sex with a lot of men. But it's not true when you like actually analyze the data and see who's lying and what are the error ratios and all that stuff. So maybe the same true here, that more men are just willing to admit to it and fewer women are willing to admit to it. But there's a, so that's the end of this particular bit on romantic relationships. Another lecture to follow a little bit later. Okay, thanks, bye.